People listening to you saying we need to be closer to the EU.
Yeah.
For a lot of people who voted to leave the EU, who voted for Brexit, many of whom then voted for you in 2024, they're going to think, hang on a minute, you're betraying the very things that you voted for and you misled them.
He has finally said the quiet part out loud. In a car crash interview to kick off 2026, Keir Starmer has just admitted he is handing Britain back to Brussels rule by rule. All while the boats keep coming. You are about to watch a man who knows his time is up. If you want to see more videos like this, hit the like and subscribe button and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Now, let's watch this together and then I'll share my thoughts at the end.
There are a lot of people in your party, even some people in your own cabinet, who quite openly suggest that actually you should do something much more radical to help the economy, is that it should go pursue a customs union with the EU. And you've ruled that out many times. Do you still rule it out? Because it feels like your government's been warming up to that idea a bit.
Well, I've always been clear that we need a closer relationship with the EU. That is in our national interest. And we've taken important steps towards that with the EU-UK reset. And it is a reset. Relations between the UK and the EU are in the best position they've been for 10 years. And that has meant we've already taken steps.
But what's next?
We've already taken steps on food and agriculture to align with the single market. That's the sovereign decision that we have taken. I think we should get closer. And if it's in our national interest, to have even closer alignment with the single market, then we should consider that. We should go that far. We're already aligning on energy, reconnecting to energy in Europe, on emissions, but I think the single market, further alignment, as I say, if it's in our interest to do so, we should take that step.
So what do you mean by that? So countries like Switzerland and Norway have access to the single market, which is one of the biggest economic trading zones in the world.
A very important one.
But leaving the single market was one of the cornerstones of leaving the EU. So what exactly do you mean by being closer to the single market? Because anyone else who has access has to follow their rules, and they also have to allow freedom of movement, where an unlimited number of EU citizens could come once again and live in this country. So what exactly do you mean? So
what I mean by that is, if you look at the deal we've already done with the EU, on food and agriculture, we're aligning our rules so that we can access the single market. So that's a sovereign decision that we've made as a government, that it's in our interest to do so. What I'm saying is there are other areas where we should consider whether it's in our interest to do the same and align with the single market. Now, that needs to be considered on a sort of issue by issue, sector by sector basis. But we've already done it with food and agriculture, and that'll be implemented this year. That'll be another turning the corner moment as we get closer.
But what would you be willing to give up if you make the judgment that, you know what, it's best for business to align in a different industry, whether that was in, car manufacture or whatever? What would you be willing to give up, and what would you be willing to pay?
Well, we take a sovereign decision whether we align or not. And where it's in our interest to do so, that's a sovereign decision.
But you know that Brussels drives a hard bargain. They're not going to give you anything for free.
Well, no, I accept that. But we've made good progress already. I think it's in our national interest to go further. What I would say about the customs union is that I argued for a customs union for many years with the EU. But a lot of water has now gone under the bridge. I do understand why people are saying, wouldn't it be better to go to the customs union? I actually think that now we've done deals with the US, which are in our national interest. Now we've done deals with India, which are in our national interest. We are better looking to the single market rather than the customs union for our further alignment. And it wouldn't be in our interest now to give up.
Would you be willing to revisit freedom of movement, allowing EU citizens with no limit to come to the UK again?
No. But we are looking at a youth mobility scheme which will be for young people to travel, to work, to enjoy themselves in different European countries, to have that experience, both our young people going to Europe, Europeans coming here, We've committed to that in principle. That is a good thing. I do think young people should have that opportunity. The question now will be, what are the numbers, what are the ages, what's the duration of the scheme?
And it's going to cost £570 million.
Well, no, we're in the negotiations with the EU at the moment as to what that looks like. But have we committed in principle to young people having a limited period of time when they can travel and work and experience other European countries? Yes, we have. I think that's a good thing. That is not the return to freedom of movement. We're not going back to freedom of movement. But I personally think that young people having that opportunity is a very good thing.
Many people listening to you saying we need to be closer to the EU.
Yeah.
For a lot of people who voted to leave the EU, who voted for Brexit, many of whom then voted for you in 2024, they're going to think, hang on a minute, you're betraying the very things that you voted for and you misled them, because now what you're suggesting again is that it's your political judgment to creep back more closely to the EU. That's what this is, isn't it?
No, in our manifesto, we're very clear about this. We said that we wouldn't rejoin the EU, but we would seek a closer relationship with the EU. That is exactly
but you're talking about getting
doing.
Closer to the single market.
Exactly what we're doing in accordance with our manifesto. And that's the right thing to do. And we're not trying to reverse the referendum. One of the reasons we've been able to reset with the EU is because both we and the EU have decided we're not just looking back and picking over the bones of Brexit, we're now looking forward on this. But what I would say is this, that what is becoming increasingly apparent is the falsehoods that were peddled by Nigel Farage and others at the time of the Brexit referendum. That promise that all you had to do was leave the EU and immigration would go down. Then we had the Boris wave where it quadrupled. All you had to do was leave the EU and you'd have £350 million a week for your NHS. Well, it hasn't materialised. All you'd have to do is leave the EU and all your red tape would be gone. Tell that to any business that's trying to trade with the EU. So our manifesto promise was not to reopen this, not to seek to rejoin the EU, but to have a closer relationship. That is in our national interest, and that is what we're pursuing. And because of the way that we're conducting this, which is not shouting and screaming and the politics of melodrama, but just quietly, seriously getting on with the diplomacy, we have got a much better relationship with the EU, much better trading relations, much better understanding when it comes to defence and security.
So, there you have it. He calls it a sovereign decision. Did you hear that? He is trying to tell you that because he, the Prime Minister, is deciding to copy EU rules, that makes it sovereign. That is absolute nonsense. What he is actually admitting to is a shadow rejoin. He is aligning our agriculture, he wants to align our industry, and he's practically begging for a youth mobility scheme, which we all know is just freedom of movement by another name. He spent that entire clip blaming Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson for the past to distract you from what he is doing right now. Reversing Brexit without a referendum. He thinks if he does it slowly, sector by sector, you won't notice. But we noticed. I want to know what you think in the comments below. Is this a sovereign decision like he claims, or is this the ultimate betrayal of the 2016 vote? If you want to see more videos like this, hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.